everybody. I am Rachelle Easton, and welcome to the Pottery Student Podcast. I am the owner of Marvelous Mud Pottery Studio here in Lakeland, Florida, and I am thrilled to have my two fabulous instructors with me, Diana Harrison and Leo Arbonis, and we are here to talk to you about our Wild Whimsy or Real Animal Sculpture workshop that we started in September. So welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh.
Happy Friday.
Yes.
I'm going to jump right in there. And that's what I do. We're all about the truth of pottery. And so one of the things about this sculpture class that we did a couple months ago, now that it's November, is that our students could decide if they wanted to do a real animal, their own version of an animal, or just extremely whimsical. And they could do an animal that actually exists, or a mythological creature, or a mixed up animal, whatever they want to do. It was like whatever worked for them. And how did you guys go about deciding what you wanted to do? So that's something that we haven't really talked too much about.
I'll let you go first.
I narrowed it down first to 35 different animals.
Okay, only
Yeah,
30
That's good. That's really good. Really good.
Impressive for you, Diana.
But I finally decided on the Phoenix because it has been a challenging couple of years for me. And it felt like it was time to rise from the ashes.
Very good.
So I kept hemming and hawing a little bit, but the final decision came because I felt like after going into the weekend, that when I was coming out of the weekend, that's what needed to emerge.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm
Very
done.
good. So what she's referring to the weekend, it was a weekend sculpture class. We did Friday, Saturday, and then they were actually here Sunday working on them. Leo, tell us about how you came about doing your fabulous lion.
Let's say I didn't have 35. Actually, I was like, man, what am I going to do? I wasn't really sure which way to go with this. Obviously, I was still going through a pretty bad season myself. And somehow the lion came into my mind. And obviously, my name is Leo the Lion. So this is some maybe influenced a little bit. But yeah, that's how it all started, with just trying to figure out, which animal. And I knew I wanted to be real. And I did a quick little search to see what would inspire me. I think the lion is what suited me the best.
And that is like the most powerful statement, because not only is the lion suiting you and the phoenix suiting you for like the seasons that you're both going through, but the styles are so you, each of you both too, because you are very realistic, straightforward, structured, all those things that we've talked about in the past, especially with throwing. And you like that little kind of existential, philosophical symbolism, that kind of thing that we have done in art journaling for so many years.
Yes.
And I found it very interesting that not only did we see that in all of our members. So our members, we had 16 people in that class, 14 people, something like that. And so the other ones were all members of our studio here at Marvelous Mud. And now that we know our members so well, not only did they choose pieces that were like right on the money for their personalities and what they gravitated to, but their rendition of them, whether they were whimsical, wild, or real, suited them very specifically. Like mine I'm usually on the very whimsy side. And so that's where mine came out. And I originally, as I have made animal sculptures for so many times, and I had wanted to do this cockatoo. And I ended up doing the cockatoo about a month before the workshop because I just wanted to get it out there and have a sample. And so with me doing the panda, that actually started as something that I was going to make for our new grandson that's being born in January. And I was going to make this cute little panda light, like a night light. And my son, his father, always loved pandas. And so that's where I started. And then I started doing that. I'm like, this is not a little boy panda. This is going to be my whimsical Mimi from Marvelous Mud. And she's going to have a crystal ball that's going to light up, and she's going to have fairy wings and that kind of thing. And so it evolved. And which is a segue into my next question for both of you, is when you decided on the phoenix and when you decided on the lion, did you have these particular images in mind, or did they evolve? Did that image evolve when you were working on it, why you're working on it. Leo, go ahead and tell me
All
what
right. All right. So yeah, once I decided that I was going to do a lion, then I started brainstorming, and I started to just, I usually close my eyes and I just try to vision it mentally and try to get what pose, what all the aspects. I try to see it before I actually create it. And yeah, and then so when I came here Saturday, I had a plan. And then after that, the clay just took over a little bit.
As we know,
You know?
it does. Exactly.
But as far as a plan, yeah, I try to find what position the lion's going to be, which way the head's going to be pointing up, and all that kind of stuff.
I love when the clay does take over like that, because I always say it was meant to be like, there's no mistakes in art. Whatever happens is because it's your subconscious, it's your feeling inside that is coming out through that expression. So I love how it evolved. Diana, did you imagine yours to be as you actually created it, or how did yours change? I know the fire at the bottom was a change, but how did that evolve for you?
There was a lot. I was trying to, you're going to laugh. I was trying to make it easy going in, which I've done plenty of times. I always say, I'm going to make this easy. And then it didn't happen at all. I fought with the clay for a little while. I knew trying to do a bird was going to be challenging just for where I am skill level wise, to be able to get in 48 or in 2 days, which is really like 16 hours, to get some real height and also get the detail that I wanted. So I thought anchoring it to the planter was really good, because then it also was like life coming out of the sculpture. So there was like new growth, and it was becoming like very symbolic. But in my head, she was going more up into the, I guess that'd be the right. And she was like coming out of the planter, or like across the planter. But the more I fought it, the more she wanted to be more upright, like more straight up. So I had it more of an angular thing working. And then I don't think it was until the second day, the morning of the second day, when she finally was like, I'm staying here. Like the clay was like, this is where I'm going to be. And I was like, I stopped fighting.
It didn't look like you were fighting with it, because I was right next to you, and every time I look over, your piece was like really, really, I was like, wow.
Exactly.
So you did that already?
So one of the things with it growing up that I absolutely love is, again, the symbolic nature of it, because you're rising up out of the ashes. You're not rising sideways. I understand the flight aspect of it going sideways, but I love the idea that it was rising up. And so just to get some background, when I teach a sculpture workshop, usually the first thing I do about 6 weeks prior to the workshop is I have my students choose their animal, or at least have an idea of what animal they want to do, and ask them to find maybe a stuffed animal, a plush, something like that. Not a sculpture, not something that is made out of pottery, but something that it has some flexibility to it. And if they purchase or have a stuffed animal that has to do with their animal that they chose, then they can pose it, they can play around with the different positions that it might be in, and get a little bit more comfortable with seeing how their joints work and how their bodies work. And then a couple weeks after that, I have them start to look at photographs, real photographs, not drawings, not sketches, not sculptures, anything like that, but photographs of the animal, even if they want it to be whimsical, because even whimsy starts with a basis of the reality. And then after that, I have them do some sketching and just play around with, just let it simmer in their mind a bit and get all these images together and come together. And then about a few days before the sculpture workshop starts, I have them basically forget about everything that they looked at, even though they're going to bring in those materials for later in the sculpt. But in the beginning, we don't use those, because what I want to see you do when you first start out is be in the moment with your clay. And all that stuff is simmering in your head, right? It's all getting seasoned, it's all moving around, and it's making its own sense. Your brain is making sense out of it, but making sense out of it that it works with you and what your intentions are. And so then when you come in, it's not like I have this sketch or I have this photograph and I want it to look just like this. It gives you the opportunity to evolve with the clay. And I think you already answered that. The clay kind of started going its own way. I know how I love that. I think that is when I have students that open the door for that and invite that into their creating opportunities, I feel like my job is done kind of thing. Because even though I'm teaching you technique or we might have specific questions on how to do a part. We did the fire on yours. We did the the little monument pedestal, all that kind of stuff on yours. But I feel like you know what to do. You just have to have permission to do it, permission for it to flow. Is that how did you feel through that and how that process, trust the journey, as I always say?
Yeah, trusting the journey. Yeah, it was pretty interesting because obviously when we got here that morning, obviously it's my first sculpture. I wasn't really sure how long it was going to take, or it's like, man, I don't know if I'm going to finish it just the same time. But I just started with clay. I did bring all I probably printed out at least 10, 12 pages of material, all realistic, different. I couldn't find the exact photo of what I wanted, so I took pieces of each part. But once I started going, I just looked at them just quickly, briefly, and I wasn't really catching myself looking at it too much.
Yeah.
Just for like maybe little fine details of where the nose and stuff like that. Yeah, and I just felt like just let it go, and I just kept on going with it.
And I love that because that's exactly every teacher. You're going to have 100 different instructors that are going to teach 100 different ways. And what I have just seen over the years is when you allow those ideas to percolate in your head for a little bit, when you're in that moment, you don't need to lean on a picture or anything like that. Yes, for getting some details. Yes, for going back and saying, I had to go back and I was like, gosh, I can't remember. Is the black on the top of a panda, does it go way down? Was it the top, like the shoulder blades, what it is? And so I would go back and look at something like that. But the idea is that you're creating your animal. And even though it's a lion, and even though it's a phoenix, and you've seen phoenix in mythology for centuries, we have our artifacts and all that shilling. But this is yours. And you get to conceive it and express it and build it and grow and evolve through it however you want it to go. But it's not such an intentional thing as it is a fluidity of expression, I think, that comes out of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sure does.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. When you were doing your Phoenix, because that did go through a good bit of evolution. And if you can, I don't know if you can lift it up at all to show that's a separate piece to the base. And the base, there you go. The base is the fire. Yeah. The base is the flame and rising out of those ashes. I mean, it's very on the mark as far as the symbolism. And so tell us how that evolved, because your original idea wasn't a separate piece.
No, correct? It wasn't a separate piece. And I really was only just going to put a couple of flames.
Yeah. Where have you only seen 2 flames? No, I'm just kidding.
I was avoiding a lot. I was trying so hard to get around and cut some corners because the first sculpture class that I did, I came in to do Medusa. Yes. And I ended up doing a soft, closed-eyed face, flowers around her head. And it took a turn. And then the second sculpture workshop I did, I just came in after that. I was like, I'm just going to let the clay, we'll see when I get there. But then this time when I had that idea, I was like, all right, I did not want to leave with Medusa this time. I wanted to stick with the Phoenix. So I was trying to stay somewhat on task, but the shape, it like you're saying, it fell into being. But when I went home on the first night and it was percolating and I was thinking about it and it was really just bothering me, and I got up the next morning with and I was like, it needs more height. It felt like the same thing, like she wants to go up, she needs to go up. And so that's when I came in, and I still was trying to cut the corner, but and you were like, no. And then once you finally got me on the right, really had to get me over the hurdle of, I got in my head, I didn't want this to drag out for weeks and weeks, and I wanted to get it done in the 2 days.
Which is exactly the phrase I do not.
Exactly.
I don't ever want to hear, this is enough. This is good
Right.
enough. Oh, good enough drives me crazy. But especially not you putting time constraints on your creation.
It's a joke, too.
Right,
Even I know it's a joke going into the week.
Exactly. What she has failed to say is that the first sculpture from 2023 has been fired once, but it's not been glazed yet, just to put that into context.
Yeah.
But the idea is that I love the term simple. I love the term streamlining or whatever. But in reality, those are subjective words, right?
Yeah.
And it is a journey, right? It is a journey that evolves with what the clay is really dictating to you. And I think the most amazing thing as far as the whole class was concerned is, number one, we only had a repeat of one animal, and that was a dog, but they were very different. One dog was based on her real dog, and she had pictures of her real dog and she was just doing the head, kind of the bust of it. And the other one was very whimsical, very much to the personality of that person. And because it was around Halloween and she wanted it to look like a witch. So she had this whole idea in mind. And then as she was building hers, that kind of evolved. But we had everything from a swan in a nest that was paying homage to a friend of our art student, a friend who had passed away. And we had a giraffe that was just wild and definitely whimsy, and that she's going to add some mixed media to. She's actually going to put some, I want to say pine straw, but that's not right. I think she's going to stitch in something. I can't remember what she told me she's going to do. I should be better at memory, but I'm not. And we had, oh my gosh, a monkey that was absolutely amazing. That has, it was this cute, like whimsical reel in a way. Mm-hmm. And then she has this cute little heart on her tush of the monkey. And we had a great elephant and a fox and a bison, and what else did we had?
Cow.
We had a cow.
Elephant.
Yes, complete with an udder.
Yeah.
Yes, the elephant.
The lobster.
The lobster.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did we say dragon? The
dragon. A dragon. And there was a bear.
Yes.
Bear.
The fox.
The fox. Yeah, the white fox. Just gorgeous. Yeah. So we had all these, a variety of animals. And sometimes I wouldn't have guessed that member would have done that animal. But as soon as that member started doing that animal, their personality and their expression came out. That's not, I was blown away, honestly.
Yeah.
We had more people in this sculpture class than we had in the past. And many of them had not done sculpture in the past, or at least, I don't think any of them had done sculpture even with somebody else. And we do a little bit of sculpture in membership class, not very much, because in 3 hours, you can't do much. We're going to find out in the month of December or November, as we do some mini sculpts of some reindeer and gnomes and that kind of thing for the holidays, that they're not all of them gravitate to the wonder of sculpting like I do. But what are some of the other things that we were all really caught in that moment for the whole 12 hours of the build and beyond, because we're 5 weeks later and some people are still working on theirs. Some people.
I'm almost done.
I keep hearing
this
that.
weekend. I should be.
That's what I'm hoping too.
And I thought we're talking about something simple. I thought this was simple, but it just seems like the simple is still taking those little details and trying to.
Yeah. The build this is what it is. I always try to get across to people too. The basic build is not too challenging, right? You start to break down the image into geometric shapes, whether it's cylinders or cubes or whatever it might be, and start building like that. But that's not really that hard. We say that it's going to take at least a day and a half to get your piece to start looking like the animal or the figure that you want to do. That's not too much. That's something that we can work through. It's the details. And just like everything else, the beauty is in the details. And even if you had an abstract piece that doesn't have facial features, all of that, you're still trying to get the detail or the positioning or the posture, whatever it is. I think that's even more challenging because you're trying to give the impression of what you want your audience to see through, but you're doing it in an abstract way. So the first day, it's exhausting. Remember?
Yeah,
and you
it
had
was.
to teach.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That night. Oh yeah, it did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I bailed on you,
Yeah.
went home, went
Yeah.
to sleep.
No.
Was I've heard that from a lot of people, how
Uh-huh.
exhausting
Yeah. It sure was.
that first day is. Mentally,
Yeah.
physically. But the second day is when, I think you may have even said it, that, or Austin or somebody, they said, like, in an hour, in the middle of the day, on that second day, within like an hour, people's pieces started to just go from, oh yeah, I can see, oh yeah, you're working on a lion, whatever, to, that's a lion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it just explodes,
Yeah.
basically, into what it's supposed to be. Did that happen with your Phoenix?
A little. Like for me, it was, I think you and I talked about this at some point, but it was trying to get that part right between the neck and the shoulder
Yeah.
to where the bird, like where it looks like the wingspan is opening. And so once I had that, then my confidence changed. Like it started to look like a bird to me. And that was where I was like, okay. I don't remember exactly when that happened, but I know it was on
Yeah.
Saturday, but I
Yeah.
can't remember. But yeah, it was once I got there, then I was like, okay, now it's a bird.
What that kind of brings up one of the other things that I absolutely love about walking with students through this process is that, like, even her head, and I did most of this at home because I can't sculpt and teach at the same time. But at one point, her head was like flopping down like this because I was helping people and I didn't have enough time to get it to sit where I wanted it to sit. So I took a rag and I just pulled it and clothespinned it in the back to lift her head up. And I didn't think anybody was watching what I was doing. And somebody happened to be coming up and asking me a question. And just that kind of movement of the head up, which gave her a very different look. They're like, oh. And then they like turned around and went right back to their thing without asking me their question. They asked me their question later. It was just something different. But they realized that just a little tweak of the way the head was positioned. Where was it looking? And that could change the entire personality of the piece. And I think that is one of the most intriguing things to me, whether it's a human sculpt or an animal sculpt, is that the sculptor starts to realize that they have the control over what that overall tone is. We talk about the clay taking over, but it becomes this relationship between the sculpt and the sculptor. And I think that when people realize that, because we know logically you're the one whose hands are doing it and all that. But we also know from experience that the clay really, if it doesn't want to do something, it's not going to. But I think there's a third aspect to that is the collaboration between the two.
Yeah.
And I think it takes about a day and a half of working on these continually for that relationship to start to meld together. And that's one reason why we're changing this. I've taught sculpture for years, but I usually have taught it in a 5-day workshop. So it's 5 days straight in a row. And we just don't have the opportunity to do that here. And so now, since we decided this week after consensus of talking to all the students or many of the students that we're going to do the 2 straight days and then have a half day, like an open studio type thing on the third morning, and then come back together 2 weeks later to do smoothing and final details and all of that kind of thing. And how would that have changed your journey if we had done that this time? Would that have made a difference? Because I know having 6 hours focused on a piece is very different than 30 minutes here, 2 hours here, whatever.
Yeah, I think it would have obviously more benefit because once you get into it, obviously it's all that little detail. You just don't, the time just starts going by so fast and you're like, oh wow, wait a second. Having that extra time, longer time will probably benefit more.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I stopped doing the 5-day workshop, I went to a 3-day, went to a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the reason why we stopped was because of people having to work. I mean, that silly thing called work. People had to they couldn't take a whole week off. But it was interesting because I found like that Sunday, it was way too much. It put them over the edge. So like people came back this time and did the open studio, but it was on their own. It wasn't really instructional. They were already in the mood and working on things. But to have a third day of instruction when it was only 3 days was put people over the edge. So like when I used to do it for 5 days, we would start out with kind of an all plastic little project in the Monday morning and just to get like a warm up activity. And then we would start thinking, putting some ideas together. They really didn't start their sculpt until the second day. And then they had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to do their sculpts. And then by Friday, it was more about cleaning up and smoothing and that kind of stuff. So it truly was only a 3-day build. And so I thought I could get away with that with just 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But there was a difference when you go into that third day about having a warm up and basically a post game. And I think what happens, and correct me if I'm wrong about your post game, because you're really not, still kind of tidying these up a little bit, but your post game and this experience has really been on your own. I've helped you and all that, but it's been done a lot of times at times that I haven't been here or somebody else hasn't been here. And not that you needed my instruction, but I think it's more about having that bounce off of ideas or getting to that point. Is there something, I have a crack here. How do I fix that? How do I make that hole disappear? How do I, whatever, those kinds of things that are very individual to the piece and not really class interpretation. And that's why I think coming back 2 weeks later is going to give us that opportunity to step away from the piece a little bit, but then all come back again and learn not only with our own piece, but learn from each other what kind of troubleshooting they've had to do. So have you picked up any, because you're here for Open Studio when people have been working on it, have you picked up some things like that from students that are working on it, like they needed to know something specific to their piece and you've learned even from what they've done?
Yeah, I think it's been a really good experience overall. Yeah, they help each other all the time. It's just part of the beauty of the studio and the space you've created for all of us. They're always really supportive. And it could be little things like, I think one day it was like, are the nostrils facing the correct direction?
Yeah,
but it's,
true.
yeah. And it is very true. And that makes them look either more realistic, and that particular sculpt was more realistic. Yeah.
I love that. I love that because it definitely does make a difference. Animals, like I've always said, I think animals are more challenging to do than humans because humans have all kinds of different faces and looks to them and all of that. And you can tell, obviously, that's a human. Yeah, that's a human, but they're all so different. But if you look at, let's say, lions, or even though we have all these different species of dogs and whatever it is, you still know that's a dog. You still know that's a lion. And you try, I think when you're sculpting it, that's what you want to make sure of, is that somebody can identify your animal for the animal you intended it to be. Whereas they're usually going to identify your human as a human. And so I think it gets more challenging in that way. Now, we're about to wrap up, but I wanted to ask one more thing. So we have people that are like, oh, I've done one sculpt. Now I don't need to do any more, whatever. Especially with you, Diana, and I know you're taking the next sculpture class too, but what is the benefit that you feel of continuing in sculpture workshops? And even if they're different, whether this one coming up is Human Story in March, which I'm really excited about, and we'll have to talk about that. But what is the benefit as far as you personally in taking multiple sculpting classes, sculpting workshops?
I think it's the people in the workshop, because Hannah and I had talked a lot about the different sculpts and things like that, and our ability, we were saying we could create on our own many different animals. We're joking about narrowing it down from 35, but that was part of the conversation, was I can do this on my own, but I like to do it with everybody else. I really enjoy it. I get so much out of it. The reason I had so much trouble narrowing it down was because it is very vulnerable when you're picking a story that means so much to you. And it's hard to walk into a room with 14 other people and to be that vulnerable. Right. And it's scary. And I can't remember coming in, even as much as I trust everybody here, I was still scared coming in. But throughout the day, like I got to sit next to Leo, and I was across from Karen and diagonally from Austin, and obviously talking to everybody around us. But you have an unverbalized support, like It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
It's just there. So you have this, and it could be like a little thing like, is this ear in the correct direction,
Right.
or is this in the correct position, or something like that? Or it's you're in your zone and then somebody cracks a joke and your tension releases and then you move on to the next
Right.
thing.
That comes through your piece.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
does. So like I could technically sit here, build my Phoenix on my own quietly and whatever, but it's a completely different and completely amazing experience to do it in a room full of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. What
Yeah,
about-
I have to agree with
Yeah.
that too, because I felt the same way. I came into it, since going through a pretty tough season myself, and I was like, man, how is this gonna? I know what I wanted to do, but I had that thing in my mind. I'm gonna do this in front of a lot of people,
Yeah.
and I wasn't sure because nobody really. There was no pressure.
Yeah.
There was nothing. Nobody was
There's
like.
no expectations.
There was no like a million questions or anything like that. They just enjoyed that moment, and it's like a safe place. And I was just,
Yeah.
and once I felt, because this is my first sculpture class, also, once I felt that, everything I just let everything go.
I
You
love
know, it
that.
was this
Yeah.
amazing experience. And one thing I really did notice, because I was throughout the day, it's great to see everybody's doing, because you see everybody's techniques. So
Yes.
I'm learning. Everybody's doing something different, so
Yeah.
it's a different technique. Obviously, mine was a solid piece. Everybody did hollow piece, so I had to learn that technique. But it got quiet. You could tell everybody was in their
Yeah.
zone, and then after so bit, then everybody started talking. We felt that release of everybody just
Yeah.
coming out. But it was just a great experience.
And that is actually one of the things as the instructor is to learn is to feel the tension. And it's not tension in the room, it's tension within each person. There has to be a certain amount of that
Yeah.
for you to be able to create these things. Because if you were not feeling that, it would not come out like this. We always talk about you growing through our discomfort, and that's what happens. And then but the thing is that I have to read the faces of everybody, read the body language, feel the tension in the room, and know when there has to be a break,
Yeah.
because people are teetering over
Yeah.
the edge sometimes. And you just, one statement can let everybody, all right, this is clay. It's just clay, that kind of thing. So I love that. I think the other thing too is obviously, and even I have a studio at home, and so I can do whenever I want, sculpt whenever I want to. But there's something about having this dedicated time
Yes.
that this is all we focus on. In membership class, even if we're doing something little, people are thinking about what they have on their shelf to glaze, what just came out of the kiln, what stage that such and such is on. When it is sculpture workshop, it is only sculpture workshop, and we are focused on that. So I think that a lot of people appreciate that, having that dedicated time to it, and you can create so much more in that focused time, and you're in the zone and you're feeling it. So it is a journey. You're trusting that journey, but that journey is happening without a lot of tangents to it. And I think that's what really helps us to create as well.
Yeah. I think when you have your hands on the clay for 16 hours, 8, and then, or 7, whatever it is, for instance, something is happening in your brain that you're not even consciously aware of, and your fingers are just gaining confidence touching.
I agree. So every spring I do a workshop in figures, and this year we are doing what I'm calling a human story sculpture workshop. And even though we have done human figures before, we do like goddesses and gods and warriors and that kind of thing, the human story is an opportunity for each sculptor to really feel something that is going on within them or around them or something, and being able to translate it into a sculpt. And it doesn't have to be literal. It can be very figurative. It can be metaphor for life, whatever. And one of the things that we had talked about was we have a grandson, and he has a big sister, so our granddaughter Willow, and they'll be about a little more than 2.5 years apart. And I originally was thinking that my human story was going to be around the two of them, because Willow's already talking about what she is going to do with Walker and how they're going to be together and what she's going to share. Who knows if that's going to continue to happen? I'm sure it is. But so I started thinking about, wouldn't it be fun to capture this new relationship then? And then my mind drifted to a couple years ahead. And wouldn't it be fun to do Willow pushing Walker in the toddler swing like she likes to be pushed now? And then I was thinking, but I want to be a part of that too. And I think so often we dismiss ourselves as spectators in stories of our lives and not really, like, I'm never in photographs or hardly ever in photographs. And we know why, because we tried to do a selfie today at a gallery that we went to, and we're taking a selfie and it's actually taking a picture of the room instead of us. But I just feel like I'm not always, I don't include myself in that part. I know I'm in the background, and the same thing with my husband. And so then I thought, how can I do possibly a story, a human story that encompasses my husband and myself and our granddaughter and our grandson, he'll be here by that time. And I don't know, it was just something that just grew. And what that story still is, I'm not quite sure, but I sure am loving thinking about it. And I can't wait to put it, instead of putting it into words, we're putting it into clay. And I know enough that I am not going to plan it out prior, because I'm going to think about it, but I'm not going to have it so cut and dry that this is what my sculpt's going to be. It's going to evolve in that moment. And that's how I know that I create. Have you guys started to think about your human stories at all? And you don't need to share if you don't want to, but just if you've got something percolating around. And
I know I started thinking about it, of what am I going to do?
Yeah.
That's how far I got. I said, what am I going to do?
Yeah, I love that though. Because it's in the back of your head.
Yeah, it's in the back.
Yeah.
What about you, Diana? Have you gone beyond I'm going to do a human story sculpt? What am I going to do?
So many of my sculpts have been very personal, like individually. So I thought about doing something for the family, but I still am feeling that tug to do more personal stuff.
I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
And all of it has to start in a personal spot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
So we'll see.
I love that. We have time to think about it.
Yeah.
And and so all of our sculpture classes have been sold out to our members and they don't get open to the public because we don't have enough space. But you can always find out more about all of our classes and about taking our Dig Deep 4-week class, which is a prerequisite for our membership invitation. All of that information is on marvelousmudpotterystudio.com. Actually, marvelousmudpotterystudio.com/pottery classes. And we hope that you come and take some classes with us in Lakeland, Florida. So we'd love to have you. And I'm going to say that's about wrapping us up today. Any last minute things about the sculpture that you want to share? And
just thank you. I just had the best time that weekend. It was awesome.
Yeah.
I have to agree. Also, it was a great experience.
And I love that it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
I love that. I do make fun of them for still working on it 5 weeks later. But I love the lasting piece, like what happens with these pieces, and that they're always going to be in our environment, because even though these are phenomenal sculptures that you could sell to somebody, I've even talked about you because this is one of a series of 3 that you're going to work on. Yeah. And I said, we're going to get you to exhibit those when they're done. But I said, you may not sell them. Yeah. I'm not giving you permission, like it has anything up to me. Yeah. But it's just phenomenal to me that you will have these in your life from here on out. They're heirloom pieces, and all my sculptures that I've ever done, I don't have all of that because I was a showing ceramic artist for decades, and what I made had to be sold if we wanted to eat and pay the mortgage, that kind of thing. And now I am really relishing the fact that I get to keep these, and I have pictures of some sculpts that really make me sad that I let go. And so I relish the opportunity that the people that are creating now in this studio get to hold on to them, because I really do feel loss, especially for one of them that I let go. And I'm glad that you all are embracing them, embodying their purpose in your life's journey, and that we all get to really come back to these in a year, 2 years, however many years, even if they're not glazed at that point.
Yeah.
But can still enjoy them and talk about them, and they mean a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to get that one in.
Yeah.
So anyways.
I'm going to start glazing the first one in January.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's a good year's goal. All right, Leo, thank you for joining us
Thank
today.
you for having me.
Diana, as always, it's fabulous to talk with you.
Same to you. And
Thank
I'm so
you.
happy you were here, Leo.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So we will have Leo here again with us in the future. So this is Rachelle Easton with Marvelous Mud Pottery Studio in Lakeland, Florida. And remember to check us out at marvelousmudpotterystudio.com. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us.